Welcome to the Grow Podcast. I'm Pastor Mike with New Hope Network. We're here to help you take your next step in your relationship with Jesus. I'm so glad you're with us today.
What's up, New Hope family? Welcome back to the Grow Podcast. This is episode 36. We're so excited that you're here. My name is David. I have Pastor Mike with me as always. Pastor Mike, welcome back.
Thank you.
We're recording another podcast.
We are.
I got nothing for 36. Well, I told you, once we hit 34 and we had our Kirby Puckett podcast, I have nothing interesting to say.
So there's no sports heroes
I'm
higher
sure,
than that number?
I'm sure there have been, but
none that are your heroes?
None. No, I've liked players who wear numbers above 34, but not enough to do anything about it.
Okay. All right.
I wore number 44 for a year in high school because some kid on my team took number 34 before I could get it, and I was very upset.
Well, that is a great transition, what we're going to talk about today.
And you know what? And today, Pastor Mike is going to teach me how to forgive my friend Jake.
You didn't even plan that transition.
Yeah, we're going to talk about forgiveness today.
We are.
Which is super easy to do.
And yes. We just choose and it's done, right?
And you're just going to kind of, there you go. Thank you for joining us at the Grow Podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you get all our new episodes. Do you have homework for this? Oh, no, we're going to talk a little more about it.
We probably need to go a little bit deeper on that. We'll go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, but quite the contrary, actually. It's even for those of us who know we're supposed to forgive and you know, that have been following the Lord and we're trying to do the right thing. It can be really difficult to forgive.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. Well, let's just go back and review why we're talking about it, because we finished up our Bless This Mess series, and one of the last big messes we talked about was when we get hurt and need to forgive people. We talked about the damage it does to us. And on the weekend, I talked briefly about how to forgive, and it's great first steps, but it is much more difficult, so I'm glad we're able to talk about it today. The reason it's so hard, man, I don't think there's a simple answer to that question. It's so hard because, number one, sin, we don't want to forgive, right?
Yep.
We like getting even. We like getting even with people. I mean, let's be honest. I want other people to feel the pain that I feel sometimes.
Yeah.
And it just there's part of us that just leans into that. It's not part of our natural sense.
Is that like reverse empathy? I want you to feel my pain instead of me trying to feel yours.
Maybe, yeah. And I think it does lend to something that we're going to talk about today, and actually we'll come back and revisit a little bit in the next series that we're going to begin. If you're listening the week it's released, we're going to begin this next week, where we talk about forgiveness and how we're forgiven. And that's, I think, the reason that we struggle with forgiving others. The chief reason is we have not fully realized how much we've been forgiven.
Yeah.
That's probably the number one reason. When you really realize how much you've been forgiven suddenly. And Jesus talked about that, didn't he? A lot. Yeah.
And you touched on this weekend as well, the damage that's done by unforgiveness and holding on to those hurts and how that hurts us in every way, physically, mentally, spiritually. It just
if you weren't with us, go listen to that. And I didn't even share all of the research. I mean, I've got file folders full of research that it's directly connected to Scripture, but this is scientific research on the biological effects of holding on to pain and resentment, the emotional effects, the psychological effects. And the list goes on and on and on. There's a reason Jesus said we need to forgive. So what I thought we'd do today is, take this a little bit further, but take us to a place where maybe you've never thought about the Bible teaching on forgiveness, and that's the Lord's Prayer. The disciples, if you remember, and it's listed in a couple different places in the New Testament, but the disciples had seen Jesus pray. They didn't know how to pray as effectively as obviously Jesus was praying.
Right.
So they came to Jesus and said, "Teach us how to pray." And he says, "Here's what you should pray like." And he teaches them what we call the Lord's Prayer. I actually don't like that verse. I think it's the disciples' prayer because he was teaching us how to pray. Yeah. It's not necessarily teaching us, here's how I pray, here's how you should pray. And we can, a lot of us could probably quote it, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, in different translations, different versions.
For some reason, we can all quote it in the King James version.
Isn't that interesting?
That one specific.
Yeah. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And here's the next part. And forgive us our debts. We like that, right?
That's a good part.
So we like it.
Let's
so
keep
far.
That one in there.
My Father in heaven, you're big, you're huge, you're good, you're holy. Your kingdom come. I want your kingdom come, your will to be done. We like that as long as it doesn't cost us too much, right? Here on earth, give us this day our daily bread. Take care of our needs, and we'll go on and list. Here's all the stuff we want you to do, and forgive us our debts. Man, I like that. And we miss this next little word.
Yeah, the qualifier.
As we also forgive our debtors.
Yeah.
And then he goes on, lead us not into temptation. Charles Williams wrote years ago, he said, no word in the English carries a greater possibility of terror than the word as in that clause.
It does seem, it does stand out so much from the rest of the prayer he's teaching, though, because it's not give us this day our daily bread as we feed those around us, or fulfill the needs of those around us. It's not, keep us from temptation as we help others. This is the only one that there's a
qualifier for it, and I think it's there for a couple of reasons. One, actually, as I was thinking about and praying about this over the last little bit, I didn't even put it in my notes. This connects with a lot of Jesus' teaching, parables that he told on, where he's talking to Simon at the party at his house. After the woman came and broke the expensive bottle of perfume over Jesus. And he tells the story of, here's this guy. One owed this much money, one owed just a little bit of money, and neither one could pay it back, and it says both were forgiven. Who was more excited about being forgiven? It was the one who owed a lot. And I think one of the reasons the as is here is just what we talked about before. We grow in our ability to forgive others as we realize our own forgiveness. And so we need to realize that. But here's what we do know from this. Our ability to forgive is directly connected to our experience of being forgiven.
Yeah.
There's no question. So if I struggle with forgiving other people when I've been hurt, no matter how big or how, quote unquote, little, like there's a little hurt, right?
Sure.
How little the hurt is. I need to start not with them. I need to start with me. I need to ask what's going on inside of me. If I haven't, and here's the truth, if I do not feel like I've been forgiven much, I'm probably going to struggle with forgiving others. Because we kind of put ourselves in that self-righteous place, right? And it's not like we think of ourselves as self-righteous. It's just like, I think I'm pretty good.
Right.
And we do that with comparison. If I compare myself to someone, I could always find someone I'm a little bit better than,
Yeah.
If you aren't sure you should or that you can be forgiven, think about that, then you will struggle with forgiveness. In other words, if I'm convinced that I have done something that God could never forgive me for, then if I don't think I can be forgiven, then I'm going to struggle with forgiving other people. So the question is, how do we begin to grow our ability to forgiveness? Because we're on the Grow podcast, right? So it's about growing. So the first step is grow in your understanding of how you've been forgiven. And if you have a relationship with Jesus, you've been forgiven. Romans 3:23 says, all of us have sinned, and we all fall short, and we all need it. We don't deserve it. So one of the things, we'll get this in the homework later, read stories like in Matthew 18. Almost all of Matthew 18, Jesus is talking about relationships and forgiveness and about how to reconcile relationships. And he tells this amazing story about forgiveness. I'm supposed to turn the noise off on this.
Yeah. And for everybody listening, the noise is not my fault.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say whose fault it is.
They're always getting after me on this one. But if you want to grow in your understanding of that, spend some time in the stories where Jesus talks about how you've been forgiven. I think secondly, grow in your understanding of who God is. Notice how the Lord's Prayer starts. Father in heaven, Our Father is in heaven, who is holy, or hallowed, if we all know the King James Version. He is perfect. He is good. And even contrast yourself with perfection, not in a way that beats yourself up, and, but realize, I need help.
Yeah.
I need help. So that's kind of the first step. If I struggle with forgiving others, it means I need to grow in realization of how much I've been forgiven. But I'm just going to dive into this next part. I think the second reason why we struggle with forgiveness is we don't understand what forgiveness is. And I touched a little bit about this in the weekend, and I've definitely taught on it before in the weekends. But we talked more about anger, and right kind of anger and wrong kind of anger the weekend. But we have this huge misunderstanding of what forgiveness is
and what it's not.
What it's not. So let's start with that.
Okay.
What it's not. To forgive someone doesn't mean I excuse the wrong thing they've done.
I think that's a huge hurdle for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Is especially when you said earlier, not that there are small hurts that don't matter, but when it's these bigger ones, these life-altering hurts that happen, that's a huge hurdle for a lot of us. Is how can I say it's okay what they just did to me?
Yeah. And you aren't saying it's okay.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and here's the example of that. Jesus hanging on the cross. He says, forgive them. He's not excusing them.
Yep.
He's dying because sin has a price tag.
Yeah.
So he's not saying sin is just, there's an excuse for it. He's dying for forgiveness. So he's not excusing it. He's paying the price for it. And the same is true for us, is that when we forgive someone, we'll talk about what we actually do in a moment. We aren't saying that what they did can be ignored, or even, and here's the other thing, we talk about forgive and forget. The only person in the universe who is capable of completely separating the memory of things from himself is God. And he says he will separate and forget our sins as far as the east is from the west. Our brains don't work that way.
Yeah.
So it's not forgetting what happened and saying, "Oh, David, it's okay. It's okay, and I'm going to forget whatever happened." I'm not capable of forgetting, especially if it's a deep hurt, because a smell, an action, something, it's going to trigger again. Neither is forgiveness avoiding conflict. I'm just going to forgive so we don't have any conflict.
Well, but we're in the Midwest here, Pastor Mike. So avoiding conflict is one of our primary skills here in the Midwest.
Here's another thing. Speaking of that, forgiveness. Some people think it means that I just need to submit and do whatever the other person wants me to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean putting up with what you shouldn't put up with. We just think forgiveness means I turn into a doormat. No, actually, forgiveness has a greater strength, I think, if we walk through it. It does not mean allowing the behavior to go on. You notice what Jesus did, like with the woman who was caught in adultery. She was brought before him. He offers forgiveness, and he says, what? Go and sin no more. So this is what he's walking through, or what we walk through. Forgiveness, and here's the big one. Forgiveness also is not about is not necessarily reconciling the relationship.
Right.
Forgiveness and reconciliation are two different acts.
Yeah, I think I've known people where that's almost been used against them, where someone has hurt them and they needed to be out of that relationship, and they're working to forgive that person, and that person says, "Well, if you've forgiven me, then why can't we still be together?" Or whatever the circumstance of that relationship is. And I think that's another one that can be really difficult to.
And truth is, not everybody wants to be reconciled,
right?
Or understands what that means, or wants to go through the mess of being reconciled. So I can forgive someone. In fact, I can forgive someone who doesn't even feel sorry for what they've done.
Yep.
Doesn't mean I allow them even back in my life.
Yeah.
There's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation.
Yeah, I think understanding that forgiveness doesn't require an apology.
Yeah.
It goes back to forgiving someone isn't necessarily for that other person. When we talked about at the beginning, and what you talked about this weekend, but the damage that unforgiveness does it doesn't do that damage to other people. That that person you're not forgiving isn't sitting there every day like, oh, David hasn't forgiven me yet. Like, I'm the one sitting there being damaged by my unforgiveness. And so I think that often we sit and we wait and we're like, well, I'm happy to forgive them, but they haven't apologized yet. You know, that's how my 4-year-old might think is,
I'm not going to forgive until well, forgiveness, and we'll talk about what it is. Unforgiveness, and multiple people have used this quote, and it's arguable about who said it first, so I can't give credit to who said it first. Unforgiveness is like me drinking poison and hoping you die. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like I'm holding on to it, and I want to cause you pain. And what we really want when we're not forgiving, what we really want is for somehow you to pay the price for what you've done. And that's not our job.
Yeah.
We aren't the justest ones in the universe. So let's talk real quickly about what it is. And some of that is a review from the weekend teaching. It is giving up the right to hurt them back.
Yeah.
That's not my job.
But I want it to be my job.
I know, I want it to be my job. But the problem is, you don't want to be hurt back for some of the stupid things that you've done.
Yep.
You know, you say, well, what they did wasn't stupid. Well, you don't know their entire story. You don't know their story, and you don't know what they were going through. You know, somebody sent me a text the other day, and quite honestly, it felt offensive and inappropriate. And if they're listening, they know who it is. We've had this conversation, and we've worked through it all. Because
you didn't avoid conflict.
I didn't avoid the conflict, but we had this conversation and worked through it. And they said, "Oh, you know what? This happened, and so when this happened as well, I just verbally vomited over everything, and I'm sorry." You know, I could have held on to that. I could have said, "Forget you," you know, all those things. And I'm so glad that we walked through that. And in that case, we were able to reconcile as well. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know their story until I'd heard their story. Yeah. I think another thing, and this goes right along with it, forgiveness is seeing them through the eyes of Jesus. Remember, Jesus already died to forgive them.
Yeah.
Now, they may not have accepted that yet or want that yet, but he already died for them. So when I choose not to forgive someone, I'm saying, Jesus, you were wrong.
Yeah.
That'll mess you up a little bit. and I think realizing they're broken, they're messed up, they are a result of sin, and they even may be hard-hearted. There may be something there that we don't know of.
Yeah.
Forgiveness, I think, if you want to know if you've truly forgiven someone, the question is, have you come to a place where you can begin to wish them well?
Yeah. That
takes time.
Yeah, that's been a big one for me. I think we've talked a little bit before, but I had a friend that hurt me professionally, and for years I had convinced myself I had forgiven them, but anytime I would see them have success in the field that we were in, I would just I hated it. And when I would see failure, I would celebrate. And I had some really good friends call me out on it and be like, you got to do something about this, because you've not forgiven him. You're not past it. And that was like the huge trigger for me when I started realizing, like, I'm glad when I'm seeing success now, as opposed to how I used to feel. And that relationship's not going to be reconciled, which is fine. But it took me an embarrassingly long time to actually forgive. But that was a huge step for me because I think I've had that question a lot in my life. Like, I think I've forgiven that person, but I don't know. I mean, how do I know? And I think that's a good answer to that.
And this is a repeating theme for us on this podcast, is growing in our maturity in our relationship takes training.
Yeah.
It takes time. You know, forgiveness is a choice, but it's a choice that you make in the moment, but then you have to train your emotions, your response, because it marked you.
Yep.
It marked you. So when we talk in the weekend teaching about beginning and revealing and releasing, were the two words we used, reveal that you were hurt. One of the reasons we don't forgive is we just kind of, like we talked about, we just pretend everything's okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's that Northwest or that Midwest nice.
Yep.
Don't hide what hurt. Now, don't beat people up. And it might take a counselor. to help you with that.
Yep.
There have been some times where I was struggling with something just in life, and as I sat down with a counselor, no shame in that. We all need that once in a while. I tell people, I take my car to someone who actually knows how to fix it. I have to take my emotions to someone who actually knows how to fix it, and it needs to be a biblically based counselor. But as we were walking through it, he started pressing in and asking some questions about something in my past, and it's something I had not thought of for decades. And I know it's kind of like, well, I don't want to, get into all that. But I realized I'd never forgiven that person. And it's not just an emotional thing. There is a spiritual bondage that happens.
Yeah.
And it's a spiritual block that happens. So reveal, and we talk about release. I make the choice. So it's a choice. I'm not going to get even. I'm going to bite my tongue. I'm not going to invite others to the pain. Because we do that, right? We'll treat the person nice, but behind their back. Oh, yeah. Like you were talking with that other person.
I would never have done that.
So it just in kind of those a little bit beyond the reveal and release, you've got to train yourself to reveal and release. The reveal can happen in a moment, but you've got to train yourself to release. So part of what I've learned in this, and I think this is part of where it goes to the Lord's Prayer, it's, Lord, forgive me as I forgive others. And the implication there is this is an ongoing process for me.
Right. Yep.
So I often in my prayer time will have to go through, okay, why am I thinking about that person? Oh, it's because I'm still feeling the pain from that. Okay, Lord. And it's not just, I'll say, Lord, help me to forgive them as you have forgiven them. But I also will say, Lord, I need to give, and I'll pick on you, I need to give David back to you. So right now I give David back to you and I entrust him to you. He's not my responsibility. Because when I'm not forgiving, I'm taking responsibility for it.
What would you say to someone who is trying to do that, but then feeling discouragement when, okay, for the last week, every day I've said, I give David to you. I give that unforgiveness to you, God. And then the next day you're still upset and they're still coming to mind, and and so then at that point I'm like, well, I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing to try to forgive, and it's not working.
Well, I think that's the starting point.
Yeah.
It's the starting point. It's like going to the gym every day, just walking in the door is the starting point, right? And if I go to the gym over and over and over and I'm not actually getting better, well, there's some other steps, I think, beyond that. You actually have to pick up the weights. You actually have to get on the treadmill.
Yeah.
And so this is the starting point of, Lord, help me, and you're inviting him into that. I think one of the next steps is to begin to work on training how you see that person. Because here's what happens. When you hurt me and I hold on to the pain, I reduce you to what you did. I see you in what you did. There was a person who did some things and said some things, some time back. And every once in a while, even to this day, the only thing I think about them is what they did.
Yeah.
And I miss the fact that 80%, probably more than that, of our interaction was phenomenal. And I just love this person, but I've reduced them to that.
Yeah.
So I have to stop and go, I need to rehearse. Man, there was so much good that happened. And we laughed together. We did. That's just a moment.
Yeah.
And so stop reducing that and begin to humanize that person. And that takes some training. Sometimes I've had to sit down and make lists. Here's the things I actually like about that person. Now, sometimes there's nothing on the list.
My list is pretty short.
And sometimes we need someone godly to help us process that.
Yeah.
And pray over that. Sometimes there is a spiritual, I'll call it a spiritual blockade or a fortress, a stronghold, the Bible calls it, and we need to have others. This is why small groups are so important. Is this a repeating theme?
Yeah.
Small groups are important to share this with them, not in a way that invites others to see them the same way you see them.
Yep.
But would you pray for me like the person did to you, called you out on it, called you on it. And I think spend time in Scripture. Now, you may need to draw some necessary boundaries. For the person that I was just talking about, because of some of the choices they made, I had to draw some boundaries and hold them at an arm's length for a period of time. And now I'm at a point where I'm genuinely celebrating what's happening in their life. And I don't know that they're ready yet. I would love to begin to reconcile that relationship. And so I'm praying about that. Do I need to take the first step? Lord, are they ready yet? And move that forward. But it's taken a long time. Yeah. Long time. Months and months and months.
And that's a part of forgiveness too. It's often going to take a long time, and it's not. We don't get to snap our fingers and I did it.
I don't go to the gym and hit hit the treadmill for 30 minutes, and suddenly I can run a marathon. Yeah. That's months of training,
and it's okay that it's a process, because that's as long as you're taking next steps and actively trying to.
It's a choice and a process, but it's a repeated choice. So it's a choice to say, now I'm going to begin, and I'm going to continue.
Yeah. Well, you have homework for us today, Pastor Mike?
Yeah. Here's the homework. Read Matthew 18. Matthew 18. There's multiple things in there. There's a great story, a parable that Jesus told in there. And reflect on, and just ask the Lord to point out to you if there's any place, anyone that you have not forgiven. If you can't wish them well, you aren't quite there yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Pastor Mike. Thank you for your teaching today. Thank all of you for joining us on the Grow Podcast. Remember that growth always starts with the next step. So make sure we're actually proactive in doing that homework this week. And as we mentioned, our series Bless This Mess from Pastor Mike's weekend teachings just wrapped up. If you missed any of that, really encourage you to go back and check it out. And then make sure you join us coming up, because we have a really exciting new series. Have we said the name of the series yet? I don't know.
We haven't said it on the podcast.
Would you like to?
Sure. My Story Matters.
Yes. It's going to be a really cool series. Very excited for it. So make sure you join us for that. Obviously, we'll have podcasts that tie in with that as well. But if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, get notified when new episodes go up on Monday mornings, and we will see you next time.